Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds, hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchy is Ted.
And today we're going to give you 5 ways to be a better player. We're going to start this video by thanking our sponsor, Nord Games. In the description, you can find a link to Nord Games as well as a special link that gives you a 10% discount on everything in their shop, and there's also a promo code there.
Games by gamers for gamers.
So go check out your Nord Games.
Today we're gonna talk. We've put out lots of videos on GM tips, but not quite as many on players. So today we're players.
Oh, players! The people that if they don't show up to the game, the GMs have no one to run for.
Exactly, and predominantly, players are going to always be the dominant source of gamers.
There's more players than there are GMs.
Absolutely. So
every GM is technically a player, but not every player is technically a GM.
That's true. So we're talking about the players at the table, not the GM.
Right. So web editor Doug had submitted an idea for a video from a Facebook post that he's seen, and what makes a good player. Exactly. And I actually had a great example of that at my table yesterday.
Nice.
I think if you ask a dozen different GMs and players, they're going to give you a dozen different answers apiece, right, on what it is. So this is going to be kind of like a personal thing. But for me, what makes a really good player is someone who captures the spirit of D&D and what D&D is, not so much the mechanics. I don't really care about that. Over time, even the slowest person will learn the mechanics over time, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if someone doesn't get what the game's about, if they don't understand that this is a cooperative game, they don't understand what a role-playing game is, like those are things you may never be able to instill in somebody. A good example was we had a player that didn't have much experience with 5e, and it sounded like she hadn't played in a long time. Now, was she an awesome, amazing role player? No, but like she had an idea for her character and she stuck with her idea, and it moved the story forward and interacted with the other players. So in my opinion, what she did right was she captured the spirit of D&D and brought that to the table, and had a willingness to go forth. So what? She needed someone to go, hey, you need to look at this modifier, that modifier, or whatever. But that stuff someone can help you with. No one can help you and make you think and act in a way that's going to make the whole experience of D&D at the table more enjoyable for everybody.
Right. And we've talked about having a veteran player sit next to a new player to help them out with mechanics, because that legitimately is simple. The person sitting next to you isn't going to know what your backstory is or what your character's motivation is. He's only going to know what has been shared by you or by exposure in the game. So that's not something that's easily helping with. You can't be like, oh, dude, say this instead. I mean, you can, but
you're kind of being a douche.
It goes against some of the typical role playing things. So having someone help mechanics, yeah, possible. Helping somebody get engrossed in the game, much harder.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, like this is a game, we play it to have fun, and that should ultimately be the goal.
So other things that can be done when you want to be a good player is, despite what you think, some DMs out there do not have all of the rule books memorized. They don't know what every single spell and magic item is going to do, even if it's something that they've given out as treasure. So, and in the example that we were given as shared by Doug, they said, okay, well, I cast Fairy Fire. Well, if you want to be a good player, as opposed to just saying I cast this spell, tell the DM, oh, you need these 4 people need to make a saving throw versus this at this DC. It's all done in one sentence, as opposed to a back and forth question and answer by the DM and the player to get all the information.
Yeah, I mean there is a big part of just knowing what your character does, being familiar with their character, all of that stuff. It is important and it helps, but it's just not the most important to me as a GM. And like that stuff isn't going to make the game better for everyone else. It's going to make things run smoother and faster, So now, if you're talking about a veteran player who's just kind of like being lazy and doesn't want to, doesn't want to help out, that's different.
True. I was looking at it as if combat speeds up. There are many people who complain about how much time combat eats away from the gaming night. And there's those who want to get into the role playing. They want to get into the other avenues. Speeding up combat is a way to get back to
Or
the
having
things,
more combats.
or having more combat. So, yeah.
Also speeding it up. Yeah, so that is another good way of being a good player is trying to be as familiar as you can with your character. If you got to write some extra notes, things like that, there are definitely ways to prep. There are also tools you can use to kind of cheat in that instance. Like if you have spell cards, you're able to look at this, just the spells that you have either memorized or prepared. They're in front of you, and you can be like, oh, and then oh, I know that they need to make a deck save, and on my character is written down my DC. So you could, yeah, you would be able to go, okay, I cast Fairy Fire. This is how big it is. If you're playing Theater of Mind, you might have to ask, how many of the enemies can I capture in my spell? The DM will give you a number, and then you'd be like, okay, well, those 4 guys have to make a deck save versus DC 14 or whatever it
Yeah.
happens to be. Yeah, that is helpful. Being prepared is super helpful. So, what are some other ways to be a better player?
Well, you can obviously stay away from anything that's going to cause disruptions. If you want to have a conversation with another player and it has nothing to do with the game, you can either step away from the table or do it in a whispered voice, so that whoever's turn it is to actually be engaging with what's going on or with the DM, you're not detracting from the game as a whole.
Right. Turning off electronic devices, cell phones, that kind of things. Really, just being courteous is just a huge help, and less distractions from the other players, the better. Less distractions from the GM, the better. And yes, part of being prepared is actually paying attention as well, because if things change during the course of the combat, or or even if it's just a social encounter or exploration encounter, and you don't know what's going on, then it's going to be hard for you to make good decisions and interact with things. So, pay attention. Good players are attentive and pay attention to what's going on. Now, granted, D&D is a game that kind of can be played over many hours and has been numerous times. So, as a table too, to make everyone better players, including the DM, plan breaks is probably a good idea. Like even in the stream that we ran the other night, we did 3 hours of gaming, and we took like a 5 minute break every hour or so, just to break it up so people could get up, use the bathroom, and also that would be a good way to do things in order to have everyone able to pay attention. And if there was people that wanted to have side conversations, like you said, instead of whispering at the table and being distractions to everyone else, they could do it during one of their breaks or something.
Absolutely. And now I'm not saying that comments or things that everyone's going to enjoy, like they're going to have a home. D&D or any role playing game is really, it's a social thing. It's an it we have people getting together. It's very hard to keep everyone on point for hours and hours at a time. So it's going to happen, but don't let things boil over too crazy, or the GM might lose interest, and the players are like, okay, well, I guess we're done for the evening because you know everybody's talking about this other thing.
Everybody's doing that thing. Yeah, I mean, it's a social game, and it depends on what the expectation of your group is and how that's going to go. Another way to be a really good player at the table is being a helper, right? And that could be to other players or actually the GM themselves. It all depends on what your game needs. For instance, someone may take it upon themselves to track initiative, so the GM can just worry about what's going on, and one player is already covering that. Or maybe there's some other things that need to be done at the table, like a rule lookup or something. One
Yeah,
of the players can do that instead of everyone at the table just stopping.
right. If a player does something, or if a monster unexpectedly does something the GM wasn't ready for. Oh well, what is this condition again, or what does that effect look like? If it's not your turn, you have the ability to look that up and provide that information so that game can progress. And once that rule call is figured out, they can just insert that right in, and it's resolved rather than taking up precious GM time. All right, so lastly, we want to put out there is sharing the experience, and this is easily put together by not only are you out there as a player to enjoy your time at the table, but you want to share it with everyone else. You don't want to steal the spotlight. You want to help lift up other players as opposed to making it be all about you. After all, D&D is meant to be a team sport. It's a group of adventurers. It's not just one dude and his lackeys.
Maybe you see a player and they're a little bit of a wallflower, or you have a new player that is just figuring out the game for themselves. You know, being a veteran role player or someone that's a little more outgoing, and instead of just jumping in there and doing all the role playing yourself, you can actually engage the other players. What if the GM puts out a scene where your character would actually shine and would be expected to have the spotlight, but instead you're like, oh, you grab Joe and like, hey, I think Flandor, the elf, would be a great assistance during this endeavor or whatever's going on, and you try and engage with our character as well, and basically, you it's like being a relay runner where you're constantly trying to pass the baton and receive the baton when it comes to role playing, so everybody gets a turn and everybody can have fun and everyone can get involved, and maybe those players that don't role play as much will get into it a bit more, especially with a little help from their friends.
It's very easy to turn to that player who's a little bit shy, a little bit less on the role playing angle of things, and just say, "Oh, what's your opinion on this quest or situation or whatever it is that's currently going on that you have the ability to take a moment and ask these kind of questions and change it up and give them that time to work through whatever it is that they're going to say, and through these little pushes or little pulls, they might come out of their shell. They might enjoy the experience that much more.
So the question is, what are your tips for being a better player? We got a place for it. It's down in the comments. While you're down there, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
While you're down there, don't forget to check the description and check out Nord Games with that awesome promo code.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.